right, good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. It's an honor to be here. Looking at the room, I think I've met most of you. It's been great to talk to you. I'm from a company called Omnivex, and I won't go too long because I think most of you know that what we do is software, and I'm very passionate about what we do. But you'll see that I don't think software is an answer to the issue. I think it's a great enabler to it. And every business that's looking at this type of technology needs to harvest it for a reason, for a benefit, whether it's customer engagement, intimate experiences. But you've got to tie it to other infrastructure, and we'll see this. So when I looked at our business and I look at the industry, I think that so many people try to do too much on their own, and I really believe in partnering. I heard a lot of it last night from award winners and those sorts of things, and take the strengths of different organizations. And when you look across these issues, when customers come to us and they start asking us, how do I do this? Where do I start? I usually point them somewhere else. I say, software's sort of in the middle. You can't really start in the middle and get these sorts of things. And you've got to get business objectives. There's got to be great content and strategy. You've got to move it along these design phases. Those design phases can be complicated and often include more than just the digital. It can be physical. So this phygital thing's quite neat. I don't know if that was a metaphor with the bull riding that's electronic. Is that phygital? Brandon, kudos. And then you get into the whole operations of it and the maintenance of it, and it can be a big beast to go on. So really, when I think, and am I advancing here? When you think of software, don't think of it like an application, is my encouragement. So certainly with ours, we try to think of it as something you can lean on to enable the possible, to tie into these business objectives, to tie into legacy systems, to enable IoT integration and those sorts of things. And you know, we believe we make great software. I think there's great software out there, but it's not the only answer. It's something you want to lean on. And when you make decisions, you don't want to create great content that is isolated. You want to be able to put it on something that can scale it out, that can move it and really help you harvest what's going on. So from my purview as a software guy, working with many of you and seeing it in the industry, and we go right across every industry, whether it's transport or healthcare or these sorts of things, I tend to think of it this way. You've got a physical layer, right? You've got hardware, you've got all the things that are devices that you lean on. And then most organizations have a ton of investments, especially as you get larger, in things like SAP or ERP systems, bond, security, and so forth. And there's all kinds of robotics tied into that. There's all kinds of edge points if you think of plants, manufacturing. Retail is no different. And then you've got this whole presentation layer. And the digital world is really intimate that way, and you're going to see a lot of it today. But you don't want to have it so that that's isolated and just delivering one level. So I think the world should evolve in this abstraction that lets you connect that new digital world to the infrastructure that already exists, because your data's there, you're harvesting that stuff. You want to unlock that ROI that was embedded in those systems, because you know, again, I come from the traditional IT world. About only 2 or 3% of all data is being used because they can't get it to the right people. And this industry is an opportunity to create that digital infrastructure that gives you the benefit of this new one we're talking about, but leverage the existing investments and really unlock it. So it's an exciting time for us. We're excited to be part of it. But again, we're software guys, and you can tell from my slides that they don't look anything like a lot of the slides you see of people who create great experiences. So today I'm lucky to be chairing and moderating this session with two maestros who make this stuff really work, leverage software like ours, not always ours, unfortunately, but like ours, to take these experiences to new levels. So I really am happy to introduce Jean-Pierre Lacroix from Chicoutimi Lacroix, and he's going to show you some of what he does. Jean-Pierre.
Good. I think you just want to change over to Keynote. Ready? Good, thanks. So we're very excited about digital, because I think as you look at the industry and what's going on, we are at a kind of cusp of transformation within our own industry. And so the question really is, you know, where is this all heading? And how does this impact consumer behavior? How does this impact retail environments? And obviously, the big question people are asking in boardrooms, our clients, is what's the role of virtual reality? Where is it heading? How can we leverage it? How do we stay on the forefront where it's going. And we conducted a study last year, which you can actually download from our website, which is to really understand for those technologies, how are they enablers to engage customers in retail environments. And this is what my presentation is going to be about. So when you look at the journey we're on, Cineplex is here. They're one of our clients. I mean, they're really in the, they've launched the 3D, and I remember as a kid I'd go to the movies and you wear the, the cardboard glasses and you watch a three-dimensional movie to make it more immersive. They've just launched a new immersive platform in the theaters where you actually get mist, the seats actually shake, the sounds totally surrounds you. The closer you can get to that reality, the more it appeals to all the senses, like yesterday's speaker was talking about, the more you're immersed in that space. But that's just the beginning of the journey, and we're all hungry for more. Where we are now, when you look at this journey of immersive, and you heard a lot of speakers yesterday talk about the path to purchase, the senses, we're really at 4D. If you looked at retail environments today, the work that you're doing, it's 4D. It's four-dimensional. Immersive experiences, and it's still very effective. And by the way, 3D, 4D, and 5D, they're not exclusive silos. In other words, we're not going to leave from 3D and leave that behind and move to 5D. We're going to have all three platforms today and moving forward. And obviously, 4D is all about the visual experience. It's about digital signage. This is, for example, some examples. This in our office in Shanghai. There's a shopping mall, and this is Samsung's store, and they're big at moving that digital experience from the outside inside of the store. It's somewhat still one-dimensional. It's still a screen projecting imagery, but it's a lot more interactive. It's larger scale with OLED panels. Now we can fill a wall. I was speaking at a conference in Hong Kong, and the entire backstage was not projected. It was LED screens. And the entire 150 feet by 30 feet was one big screen. And so you see more and more of this technology getting less expensive, getting larger in scale. And that it does provide that sense of immersion. You don't see the seams on the screens. You feel you're there because it fills your peripheral vision. Those are really important things. For us, in retail environment, we look at three areas of, and you'll see this path to purchase. And it's important for you to understand the role of digital in those three areas. What's the role of digital in a track? So social media, mobile, web, these are great platforms that are digital. And the big issue and the big conversations we're having in boardrooms is this word called seamless, right? Because most of our clients and most organizations work in silos. And so they're looking at, okay, we've got the web development team, and they're developing the e-commerce platform, and they're working on the M platform, the mobile platform. We have a social media group that are working on the social platform, and then we've got conventional marketing, and then we have store environments. What the clients are asking now is how this all come together. To Chris's point, it's about the interface. It's about how they navigate that same interface that happens on the website should be the same interface that they see in the store environment, so that it's this cohesive feeling that you don't have to re-educate the consumer. And in the Transact, how do you leverage that store environment? Retail today is all about how do we create that stickiness, right? How do we keep the customer in the store so they don't buy online? And if they buy online in our stores versus going to Amazon. As you saw yesterday's presentation, we also did a study called Restore on what's happening between online and retail. Who's winning the emotional relationship with the consumer? And ironically, today, online is actually winning that emotional connection, the sense of discovery. So how, as a retailer, you engage that consumer to create that emotional connection. Digital is a great platform. And obviously, in the retain, once they've come to your store, how do you create that ongoing engagement, the endorsement, the brand ambassadors, the employee brand ambassadors? And digital plays a really important role. But each of these steps, digital plays a role, and the tools are different. And understanding those is really important when you look at the path to purchase. And then you can look at it from a linear, digital linear. Obviously, you look at what are the role of the different tools in digital, and we look at, obviously, the website's very important. It's the #1 research tool customers use to make their buying decisions. But how do you drive that online experience to a physical store? It's really important to have that kind of transfer of knowledge, easily transfer of knowledge to the retail store. And how does digital play in that store, multi-screen? How does it play from a sales choreography standpoint? You see more and more retailers take the food service industry. They're moving from the server taking your order, which is one pain point, and the server taking your payment, the second consumer pain point, and they're eliminating the digital technology through tablets at the table, right? And so how does technology enable the sales force to do a better job? Because very often they forget about the important points that they need to do. And then obviously from there, virtual reality plays an important role. We're doing a bank in China right now, and our client said, well, we tried VR and it didn't work. And I said, well, what did you do? Well, we just had the VR and we just had some movies playing on the VR. And I go, well, you missed the point. You need to understand that technology, digital technology, has to serve a need. It has to fill a purpose. What's the purpose you need to fill with VR? And if you don't define what that purpose is and it's meaningful to your audience, it's just a toy. And so understanding those is really important. And obviously the last step is, again, that validation, having the customer like your store, comment, and validate. Because as you know, online validation by friends, family, or support groups plays an important role if you're going to go back and buy those products. So we look at all of those tangents whenever we look at a store experience. You heard that we had won the Flow. This is the actual rendering of the store experience. So Flow is a large network of about 500 stores in the Caribbean. Nice place to be if you're Canadian in the wintertime. We really enjoy going to their stores in Jamaica and Bahamas and the Caymans. And they came to us and they wanted to create an immersive experience. They said, JP, it's not just about selling technology. We want this to be a platform to build relationships with our customers. So we look at each of these points of contact, moments of truth in that path to purchase. We look at, from a standpoint of creating departments and what are the role of digital in those departments. We look at the greeter station, what's the role of digital there, and what's the role of digital in the windows. And so we map out, whenever we do a project, we map out right from the beginning as we're designing those stores, where are those digital moments of truth, and what's the role of digital at each of those junctures. And so when you're looking at your stores, don't look at it as one platform. Understand that each zone, a customer enters the store, they're walking very quickly. What's the role of digital? Having a 60-second or a 120-second spot is useless at the store window. You've got 3 seconds to make that connection. Understanding that if you've got 3 seconds, that content's got to be very different than when they're inside your store. So understanding those zones and the role of those zones is really important. And we look at all of those. We look at all the way down to the product level, because that's really where the engagement happens. That's where a lot of the attention. And this client, it was interesting. They were merchandising phones, and they were letting the Samsungs and all of the Blackberries and the Apples carry their own message on those phones. And this is where the true moment of truth was happening. This is where the customer was spending the most time. So understanding that this became a great platform for us to communicate what Flow was all about and the values and some of the services. Obviously, they're a cable and wireless company. They're interested in not just selling phones, they're interested in selling packages. So understanding that platform was important. And then what we found out also in digital signage is that it's good to have zoned information. It's good to really connect on a product level in those zones. But it's also important to reconnect all the digital signage as one big message inside the store, so that you create that sense of attraction and disruption when they enter the store, because everything is linked in. And so we had this wave connecting all the communication throughout all of these moments of truth inside the store. And then we looked at, how does that integrate with all of the communication all the way across the screens? And then how does that line up with the product information? A lot of attention is given to building that brand, and that brand has to translate into different messaging formats and different sizes screens and different configuration screens. And so here's an example of the brand identity being applied, and it's very important as we do that communication that we build that brand equity. And obviously, here's some more examples. So all templated. And then we took that right down to the product information, right down to the phones. And I think what's also important is big data. You hear a lot of big data. The more the data happens at the moment of purchase, the more accurate that data is to be predictive of the behavior of the customers. And so we provide a lot of analytics to our client through this technology. Sorry. We want to see if you're paying attention. We can tell if the sales people are using the right tools, or they bringing the customer to the right section of the sites and to the right platforms, or they're doing their job driving the right package. We have metrics now that we can go back to the sales force the next morning and say, hey guys, you're selling the wrong packages, you're spending too much time over here, you need to spend it over there. So you can fine-tune your sales choreography, which is really important. And the last project I'm going to talk about is Adidas. And Adidas, really, it was about, in a large store, how do you create attention to their golf line? And we use interactive technology, RFID tags, so as you pick up the shoe, the screen talks about that product. And I think that's very important because most large store formats, I don't know if you're like me, you go in and you look for someone for service, good luck, right? And so being able to self-sell yourself in a retail environment and allowing the digital technology to do that effectively is a great way of selling more product. As Adidas discovered, it sold a lot more shoes, especially when you're trying to compete. That leads me to my the last. So we talked about 3D and 4D, and so 5D. So we did an online study last year here in the U.S. and Canada, and we really asked consumers, what's the role of digital in the retail environment? And we did a large consumer study. And we really wanted to find out, specifically millennials, where is these trends going for? And you can download this from our website. It's a huge study. And what was interesting is when we asked, I know I can go through the entire study because we don't have enough time, when we asked VR, what is the role of VR? And it was interesting. We had all kinds, where VR plays a really important role is in home decorating, in banking, wine, beer, and alcohol. It was interesting that those are the three categories that if you're going to offer VR inside your stores that has incredible value. Home decorating, figure it out. IKEA discovered augmented reality. It was a great tool. People have no sense of spatial relationship when they're buying furniture. So being able to visualize what that couch looks like in the home setting, your home setting, plays an important role. And we see the Oculus Rift and the HoloLens playing, especially the HoloLens playing a really important role. We're currently using HoloLens in client presentations. We're actually building, the bank that we're doing in China, we're actually building that model on virtually, and we're basically bringing the glasses and having the client walk through the space virtually. And so they get a true sense of the decisions they're making, because that's one of the biggest challenges. People make decisions and they don't understand the implications, and we build a prototype and they go, well, I didn't think that that's what it was going to be like. Well, now they can actually visualize exactly what that's going to be like, and that this provides. So ultimately, you heard yesterday, it's about making those emotional connections. It's about the experience, not about the technology. You heard yesterday the presenters saying, all of these toys, these are great technology, but it's not for the sake of technology. It's about creating that customer experience. It's a lot more important for how customers feel about the experience. It's about the emotional connection the consumers have with that experience. Digital is a great platform, immersive platform to create that experience emotionally. And really what we're seeing today is a dissolving of the different disciplines. We're seeing software programmers developing retail environments. We're seeing digital designers creating advertising. We're seeing these silos of the design industry are disappearing, and I think it's important. And then finally, I'm just going to end with this little video.
Online shopping has become a major phenomenon in China. But when it comes to grocery shopping, people still prefer the traditional supermarkets. This is Carrefour, with 220 outlets at present and adding 20 more this year alone. Each store handles over 10,000 customers every day. Tesco and Metro are just as big. Competing against these multinationals is a local e-commerce company called Yihaodian, an online grocery service. Yihaodian means number one store in English, and that's exactly what the founders want to be, the number one. To realize this dream, Yihaodian had to steal customers from the much bigger pie of brick and mortar shopping. So, on October the 15th, 2012, we opened 1,000 stores overnight in some of China's most strategic and iconic locations. And since we are an online grocery store, our supermarkets weren't made of brick and mortar, but of pixels and bytes. Measuring 40 by 40 meters each, they covered the equivalent of 1.6 million square meters of prime commercial real estate. We placed them conveniently on parking lots, business campuses, and near office buildings. In Beijing alone, there were 100 stores, even at Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City. In fact, we even built one right under Carrefour's nose. Our location-based augmented reality app helps people locate the nearest store. They can enter it like a regular supermarket, walk through the aisles, and choose from over 1,000 products. When they check out, purchases in their virtual basket are delivered straight to their home. Time-starved consumers liked this combination of traditional retailing experience and e-commerce. After all, there are no long lines at checkout and no trolleys with wonky wheels. News of our 1,000 store launch spread through PR, video and word of mouth. And Yihaodian was thrilled by a staggering 17% increase in revenue over a 3-month period. So now when it comes to sales per square foot, we can truly say that we are Yihaodian.
So competition in the retail world is going to change dramatically. This is just one example of what could happen where technology and virtual immersive experiences combine. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jean-Pierre. I was really curious on the virtual reality one where you started talking and you didn't get to wine and beer, because I know we talked a little bit of wine last night. I mean, we don't want to give up the physical experience with wine. So how does the VR play with that, and how did a Canadian get selected to help with that?
Well, I think wine's about experience. When you're buying wine, you're buying a place in a story, right? And virtual reality allows you to get into that place in that story and being there. And so if you can't go to Bordeaux region to enjoy that wine, you can actually put the goggles on and and if you've ever worn VR goggles, how many of you have worn VR goggles? Yeah. Once they're on, you don't want to take them off. And with the technology getting better and better, and that's driven by the pixels on the screens, it's driven also by the processor speed. You're there. You are in that space. You are there. It's very captivating. Once you're in that space, you really don't want to take them off. And so the better the quality, I can just see Cirque du Soleil have a VR. If you've seen that, it's unbelievable. You're sitting in the stage watching their show, and you look back and around, and you can see people behind you. The actors come right up to you. You can almost touch them. And that almost there is an amazing experience.
Yeah, great. Great, good answer. Okay, well, Stephen Chen's our next speaker, and he comes from Float Hybrid. And we met by process of this. David actually introduced us, and we've been talking, and we spent a fair bit of time yesterday. So I've really already had some great conversations, and we walked through what we do yesterday, but I'm really excited to hear what you got to talk about. Stephen, just come on up.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. So first, thank you very much for having us here, David, everybody else. So this is all a little new for me and new for us as Float. So Float comes from, we started out as a VFX and games development company, and the whole retail commercial space is relatively new for us. I see a couple people I've worked with here before. And so let me start with a little bit of disclosure. So when I got invited to do this, I had never heard the term phygital before. It was completely new to me, right? So I wanted to define it for myself, and I looked around. I did what everybody does. We Google it, right? So I Googled the word phygital, and I found this. And this is, I think, a really good description of it. It's convergence of the consumer's physical and digital world. And physical, like Jean-Pierre was saying, means everything. It means taste, touch, sight, sound, feel, all of it. And digital world, I would define the digital world as the world that's created by all of our information. Right? It's the world that we happily uploaded to the web in the last 10 years. So one of the questions I started to ask was like, well, how did we get here? Right? So a little bit of history. Pre-2007, digital revolution's in full swing. Right? We happily uploaded all of our entertainment, all of our commercial life and all of our, even our personal lives up to the web, all ended up in these giant server farms all over the world. We pushed this stuff up for free in many cases, and we were happy to do so. Post-2007, or right around 2007, I would say, a couple things started to happen out there. Technology changed radically across 3 different axes, as I see it. Personal devices, inputs and sensors, and displays. And what I mean by this is this, actually. So here's my kind of funny little graph of where things started out. In 2000, everybody had a flip phone. That was the coolest thing you could have, right? The best thing you could do on that was maybe text. Inputs and sensors, the most sophisticated sensors most of us ever dealt with on a day-to-day basis, game controllers. Displays were still these big Sony Vega Trinitrons that weighed, God, I don't know, 100 pounds each. Come 2005, smartphones start to happen. So iPhone doesn't really happen until 2007, but smartphones really started to happen around 2005. The Wii was a revolutionary game device in my industry. Got people off the couch, got motion involved. It was really kind of a new thing. Displays got flat, and they got cheap, and people could start buying them. Come 2010, iPad emerges. iPad is the only device out there. When it first came out, it was really the only device out there that was for one purpose only, and that's to consume media. Very different than other kind of portable devices at the time. The Kinect actually got rid of the controller altogether. Your body is the controller. Very, very different way of looking at input. And screens got high resolution. 4K appeared, and that also got cheaper. Today, we're looking at things like wearables, the Internet of Things, and as we've all been seeing in the last year or so, VR and AR. So what did this really do, right? So people over the years kind of adopted these technologies readily, and this changed what consumers want. Suddenly, the experience of just uploading our stuff and downloading it back through a laptop screen or even a desktop screen just wasn't enough. We expected more. So consumer expectations have changed quite radically. So here's kind of what that looks like, what the inputs and sensors have done for us, right? So before, games were mostly sitting on a couch or sitting in front of a PC. After 2007, or after about 2007, it started looking like the pictures on the left and right here. So families got up off the couch with the Wii controllers. It opened up a whole new demographic. That's not my grandma, but grandmas started playing games, and they started kind of looking like that. This is a whole new demographic, right? People that never played games before started playing games because it engaged their movement, it engaged their entire physical experience. Displays are kind of a big deal, right? Now, we take it for granted that big displays are flat, as Jean-Pierre was talking about. You see them everywhere, but really, I think the effect of having a big flat display is that TVs and screens aren't objects anymore. They are not just something to sit in your living room in a box. They're a part of the architecture. So my background, originally I started out as an architect. The image on the left side of the screen is a Turkish artist. He's a data artist. He calls himself a data sculptor. And these are giant screens at a lobby in San Francisco. And it's become quite an event, actually, just kind of driving by or walking by. I walk by this thing every day. And it's an amazing thing to see. He's using data, real live data, to shape what's happening on the screen. It's a really different way of looking at architecture, where the screen is actually just a part of it. The image on the right is from a corporate headquarters, and people are using these big screen displays as part of their boardrooms or part of their regular meeting process. Ooh. There we go. And finally, personal devices, right? So these are scenes that we see every single day. Really, personal devices, the effect is that everybody has access to all information everywhere they go, anywhere they go. That's the upside. The downside is that everybody looks like that. I have a 14-year-old son. He looks like that walking to school. Any street scene in San Francisco looks like that on the side. That's actually Japan. But people are walking around in plastic bubbles now. How do you reach these people? I think that's a really interesting question. So the next slide is about that. I think the answer to this is really, and you've heard this many times, and hopefully I'm just reinforcing this, is that the way you reach these people is you create emotional experiences. It's really about creating an immersive experience, right? So to me, an immersive experience is one that engages the entire sensory range, and that engages your physical and all of your digital content. If you can bring those two things together, that's really kind of immersive. And the reason why you do this is because you create an emotional connection. And as you guys know probably better than I do, emotional connection is what drives consumer behavior. It drives buying decisions. That emotional connection is super important. So really, this kind of all comes back around to what the phygital approach. It's really not about technology. I think you've heard this many times already. It's about considering the entire sensory process as a part of the design. So I want to show you a couple projects we've worked on.
One of the most prominent signs of autism in children is the avoidance of eye contact. Autism Speaks wanted people to truly experience how this must feel for parents. We created an interactive video screen installation featuring a life-size girl. People were invited to make eye contact with this girl. No matter how people tried, the girl would avoid eye contact every time. Using state-of-the-art Kinect technology, the motion sensor was able to track the person's head and body movement, causing the girl to look away. Avoiding eye contact could be a sign of autism. Learn all the signs at autismspeaks.org.
So it's kind of funny for me to see this. This was done a couple of years ago. Kinect is certainly not cutting edge anymore. But I think this is a really good example of what phygital could be like, right? Or should be like. We used eye contact. Eye contact is really important when you make eye contact with someone, like I'm making right now. It's an emotional connection, right? You engage with someone. And in this case, like for kids with autism, one of those things is that you can't, they have a very hard time making eye contact with people. And to really understand that, it's, you don't want to do this with a real child, but doing it like this really kind of reinforces what that experience could be like. We engage movement in something like this, where you actually have to kind of move around and try and get her eye contact. And if it engages your movement, you understand that experience much better. And it's about human engagement, right? Ultimately, it is that emotional connection. And that's really kind of what that project was about. Now, what's interesting about this thing is we did this completely for free for the Autism Speaks Foundation. And it was done over the course of, I think a week, maybe 2 weeks. And to this day, it's one of the projects I'm more proud of than some of the other ones. The next one is for
Every
GE.
2 seconds, somebody takes off on a plane that's powered by a GE engine. But most people take this massive metal cylinder for granted. We wanted people to not just see, but to really feel something that GE makes, which impacts everyone for the better. To bring this story to life, we needed an idea as big and innovative as the Gen X engine itself. Throttle Up was a massive interactive hologram that let people build and launch the Gen X jet engine. By simply moving their arms and hands, people were empowered to put the pieces together of a 20-foot life-size jet engine. To achieve this, we brought together 3 cutting-edge technologies for the first time: a soft kinetic motion sensor camera, holographic projection technology, all controlled by a custom Unity gaming engine. Visitors were able to conduct a microcosm of floating parts that appeared almost like twinkling stars in the sky, bringing the pieces together to create a life-size gleaming jet engine. And in the end, they got to feel the awesomeness of launching something that changes the way the world moves forever. People lined up for over 2 hours to experience Throttle Up, and it made a lasting impression on all who came to see it.
So obviously most consumers aren't going to go out and buy a jet engine, right? That's not something that's for sale at the Walgreens at the corner. But this was a really interesting project for us. I think our goal for this one was to make something super complex, very mechanical, very hard to understand, like a jet engine, relatable at a really personal level. And really the goal was for GE to amplify the brand. It's empowering, right? This thing is, the screen was this gigantic 40 by 40 foot huge screen that you got into this theater for. And we use motion control to do that, right? So using your hands to kind of move around and disassemble, reassemble, and launch this 2-ton or more, actually, I think, engine was an incredibly empowering experience for most people. It was surprising. At the end of that, I don't know if you caught it, but we used fans to generate a little puff of air. So when you threw the engine out into space, you got a puff of air in your face. And it was surprising for most people, and I think that makes it more memorable. And it was immersive. The scale and the holographic projection is unlike anything you've ever seen. VR is a great kind of personal experience, but this is shared amongst lots of people, and I think that sharing is an important piece of this. Scale is important. When you do things like projection mapping or holograms, you really kind of have to do them at scale. Scale makes it immersive. Scale engages your brain in a way that small screens don't. And I think it's really important. And ultimately, at the end of this, the brand amplification through social media was what they were after. And you make an emotional experience like this, and people talk about it. They talk about it through all their social channels. And that's a really important piece of it for GE. So, are people going to go out and buy a Gen X engine? No, not me. But the next time you go to Home Depot and you see GE light bulbs, the halo of that experience on the brand is an important one to have. So the last project is the most probably relevant and commercial for us, at least. This was for Pacific Gateway Concessions. It's a store in the airport in San Francisco, the International Terminal. So this project really kind of brought together a lot of the R&D and the technology that we've been using for the past couple of years. Pacific Gateway really kind of wanted us to, this was not a new install for them, this was not a new store for them, this was installed into an existing location, and they didn't want to change that. They wanted to keep their location exactly as it was. So our system kind of installed directly into this. And I think the important pieces that we learned about the experience for this were a couple things. I don't know if you caught it, but let me go actually to the next slide. Right when someone walks up to the display, there's that flash of red, right? So red is kind of the brand for Beats headphones, is the color of the brand. And there's this flash. It happens really, really quickly, but it's that instantaneous, like, oh, there's an attract there. And you guys have probably seen this diagram many times now, but attract, engage, inform, convert, and analyze. All the interactions are natural, right? There's no tagging. We're not using any kind of beacon or RFID tag on the product at all. You kind of just reach out and touch the stuff. And it can be any product. It doesn't have to be the headphones. It doesn't have to be a box product. It can be anything. It can be food. And we track all of this data, everything that you're doing. So when you touch something, we know what you've touched. We know how long you were there. And we can collect all this data and kind of present it back to you. So, I mean, this project was really kind of a summation of all that technology. So we've been doing a lot of research into gesture control and what the experience is like, and kind of bringing it down into this more commercial application was a fascinating exploration for us. So let's see. Go to the next one. So a little look into the future. So display technologies are not stopping in their development. You've seen some of the new stuff that's out there today. Holograms, VR, augmented reality, mixed reality. These are all, I would put these all into a category of sensory immersion technologies. The image down there is a real basketball court that's on a digital basketball court. But there's a gigantic projection map on that floor, and it looks like the floor is kind of dissolving away into a bunch of cubes, which is pretty cool to look at. But it's a shared experience, and I think that's what these technologies, well, at least the large screen displays, projection mapping, and holograms are about, is these large-scale shared immersive experiences. So this is a project that we did with a company that we're associated with, the Michael Jackson hologram for the VMAs. So this is something that we're right in the middle of doing a lot of development for, these very large-scale shows. We just kicked off a project to do an Elvis show, Elvis Presley, digital holographic Elvis Presley. And we're developing the entire thing actually in VR. So you can, we've got a real Elvis or digital Elvis in there and a digital set, and we're allowing the director to experience what the whole show is going to be like before he shoots a single frame of it. And that's been actually a really interesting experience. Let's see. So VR and AR, my view on this is maybe a little different. The only real relationship between these two things is they have the letter R in both of them. They're really, really quite different technologies. VR and AR are not the same thing. And my view on VR is it's here today. It's definitely going to be a big thing. There's a lot of ink, both digital and real ink, that's been used for these things. We've been working with these systems for a couple of years now. And there are real challenges with these things. And John Pierre was talking about some of these challenges, and I think they're real. And you have to be careful about what's out there. Using these things in the wrong way is very counterproductive. Personalization, I think, is a big trend that we've seen. There's a group here that was talking about their emotional intent analysis engine, which we've seen in a lot of our more commercial products, our more commercial clients. This woman on the left, who looks a little bit mad and angry, is her expressions are being analyzed, right? So there's a graph of her over time, and it's measuring her intent, what we think her intent is over time along several different axes, how much sadness is in her expression, how much surprise, how much anger is in her expression. These are all kind of non-personally identifying. We don't know who this woman is. She happens to own a company called Emotion, which was just bought by Apple. So big companies are actually getting really interested in this. Being able to know what a customer is thinking at the moment of purchase or what their intent is a really, I think, a very disruptive technology. I think it's a very, I'm not sure where that's going to go, but it's an interesting way to start looking at what customers are doing. And I think we're also about to enter into a post-mobile world. Cell phones, which we've all been depending on for so long, are going to give way to smart spaces, smart appliances, and wearables. Smartphones are going to be just the conduit that gets you into all the rest of this stuff. Here's a couple of products that are actually out now or are soon coming. Amazon Echo is one. It's voice control. It connects to everything in your home. And it's a different way of interacting with what's going on by just speaking to it. It's a natural interaction. The Nest is changing the way that everybody uses the appliances in their homes. And that product on the right is done by two small San Francisco startups, Google and Levi Strauss. They got together and produced a jean jacket where all the fibers are actually interactive. So the jacket itself links up to whatever network is available to you, or whatever screens are near you, and you can actually control stuff by touching your arm. The buttons are where a lot of that connection happens. And this was just announced at Google's I/O, which is like a week or two ago. So the final slide, I like to end with this one. So this is almost 120 some odd years ago. This was the first film that was shown in what was then thought of as a theater. It's really kind of a one-room thing. And the reason I want to end on this thing is that when this was shown in 1896, people were amazed. They thought it was real. They got up out of their chairs. They ducked when the train came by. They thought the people were real. We look at this today and think, how is that possible? These are grainy shots of people walking around a train station. But really, I want to bring it all back to what I was talking about originally, which is that consumer expectations are changing all the time. And that devices and the things that we use in our everyday life are what drives that in many cases. And as retailers and as the retail experience evolves, those expectations are what consumers are expecting. So kind of understanding where that stuff comes from and where it's heading, I think, is an important piece of the development of the retail experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you, Stephen. So, yeah, I like looking at things historically as well. When I talk a lot to manufacturing companies, I put the old factories and how it used to be hooked up a steam engine and run down the pipes, and then you reorganize the plant to work a different way, and now it's more digital. And at first, they just did everything the same way. And then they realized, well, geez, we haven't changed anything. We've just got automatic power. We need to actually reorganize the whole thing. And then the assembly line changed, and everything collides at the same point. You have to reorganize the work around the power or the most performance you've got at the time. So, great point. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute. But you mentioned smart spaces, some movement in smart cities, smart retail, smart factories, and you both mentioned data in real time, Stephen, from you, and you mentioned the more accurate you can get your data, the better the experience is, the whole thing becomes tighter. And I know that all the customers that I see and many people in this room struggle with, if they've got a department or I've got budget for this and I've got to go across these silos. I've got, many of you are dealing with facilities people, you've got IT, you've got management, you've got marketing. How hard is it to get all that to come together for some of these things that you're doing?
It depends on the category. So banks, it's really hard because most banks are run by lawyers and the IT department or the security department. And so we got to get them. It's interesting. The selling happens to them first. Marketing gets it. Facilities gets it. Other channels like conventional retail, they get it. There's already a lean initiative going on in most of those companies. There's breaking down the silos, not because of digital, but just because they know that that's an issue with being, the new buzzword, by the way, is agile, being more agile in the marketplace. And so, when we look at Flow and the Source and some of the other projects we've worked on, we've had no challenges. The issue, though, that we face, and we heard it yesterday, is that clients really don't understand how to budget digital. It becomes a line item that becomes the biggest part of the discussion. Oh, I didn't realize we need to spend $300,000 in this store. Oh, I didn't realize we need to budget content management for the next 10 years. And that's where, I think that's where the learning is happening. That's where the friction points in most projects happen, is that it's at the budgeting stage. And we always try and, right from the beginning, show them, here's the range of what you're going to be spending. And very often they'll say, no, it can't be that much, or why is it costing this much? But we want to have those conversations right at the beginning. So the advice to you is, if you're working with clients, have those conversations at the beginning of the project, because they become huge friction points at the end.
Okay, I agree. Anything to add?
No, yeah, it's an interesting. I definitely see that happen. For us, we try to approach these projects in stages and as small, very, very small efforts that just kind of introduce them to the idea of a digital experience in their store. There's no data analysis with some of these things. There's none of that. It's really just the experience. And then we kind of show them, hey, look, we're actually tracking a ton of data for you. And we show them what that data looks like. And it's a little bit more of a slow process. The most successful clients, where we've been most successful with clients, is in a process like that, where we introduce them at relatively low cost. Just the experience part of it. And that introduces them to the idea that they could use all of this data. Once they've got the experience and they see kind of what it's doing at a instinctive level, I find the upsell, if you will, to the data analysis packages and the content management tools and all that sort of stuff, which is much, much harder to understand, becomes easier when you can show them what the end effect is to start out with.
Yeah. See, I find it interesting because I came from traditional IT, so I sold storage systems, backup recovery, disaster recovery to big banks and institutions, and security software and identity management, intrusion detection. And companies are spending literally billions of dollars protecting this data because it's what makes companies unique, going back and forth. And yet, you read IDC or Gartner, and it's like only 2 or 3% of it's being used. And I see this as an interesting opportunity to exploit that data, right? They've harvested it for a reason, you've got it, and how can you kind of, I hate to use the word weaponize, but you're going to use it in your business to achieve your targets better and to reduce waste and those things. And it is, the last mile is connecting that information to people, whether that's customers and engagement like we're talking about largely today, but employees and different people to create action, to get them to do something different or optimize it. And the closer we can get to that, that's there. And it's interesting that they spent so much money backing it up, and now the resilience is there because the technology is virtual, you can snap over, but they're not yet using it to really change their business. And I think that they'll get so much more return top line as opposed to cost reduction. They'll get actually revenue growth and those sorts of things. So it's an exciting time for us.
You and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday outside. That San Francisco airport project was interesting because we installed just the experience first, where things would just light up when you got close to it. And the retailer started, I was telling you about this yesterday, the retailer started asking us, so you're tracking all this data, can you tell us exactly when, or can you change it, can you change what's on the screen based on the time of day, based on other kinds of data? And we asked them, well, what kind of data are you interested in? And he said, well, this is an international terminal. Flights are going out to all over the world all day long. And at 2 a.m., there's Asian flights that are going out to Korea, Japan, China. And when those customers come through, they're buying liquor and beef jerky and products to bring back with them. So he said, can you change it at that point? And I said, well, absolutely. I mean, you tell us where the data is, and we'll change the display so it'll read Korean or Chinese or whatever it is that you want. And we'll change the ads to be whatever you want as well. So the discussion with them at that point was a much easier discussion to have. It's like they understood what the effect of the experience was going to be, and to tell them, oh, well, you need a CMS system to change that content, and we need a back-end data pipeline to grab all that content. It was a much easier conversation to have. They were like, we see the need, we see what we want it for, and they were much more willing to spend to do those sorts of things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that what we're seeing, if you look at innovation, most innovation is to eliminate a step in the process. So if you think of our tasks here today, you have a digital platform where you need to have media players, you need to build an internet and infrastructure for that. Then you have a media playing list, and then you have to create the content, and that content has to be curated with longer lead times. Technology innovation is going to start eliminating all of those steps. We're already having media players in TVs, LCDs. What you're going to see is what I'll call intelligent content, where it will prescriptively understand through pulling, if you think of apps, pulling information for the flight patterns that there's a high propensity that's going to be an Asian, or the camera is going to pick up facial recognition that that's an Asian customer. And it will curate the content in Mandarin automatically without no one doing anything. It will start pulling information quickly. And that's what you're going to see. You're going to start seeing collapsing these different kind of, I'll call them operational procedural silos. And it's just going to be one. And it's going to get simpler and easier and more effective. And that's what we're seeing.
That's great. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
One question. We have the same situation where we gather a ton of information from the stores, and we presented the outcome to the guys working in the store, and it happened that they have no time to spend on it. And so, coming back with nice graphs and colors and stuff, and they said, "I'm sorry, guy, but I have no time." And the other thing is once you present the information and there is an insight there. Very likely it's going to take a lot of money to implement the idea or the solution that comes out of it. So the guy says, well, yeah, right, I understand, but there's no way I can spend the money to follow your advice. So what's your take on this? Does it make any sense to gather that information because it can't be used, both because they have no time and it's too costly?
Yeah, you're bringing up a great point. Here's the issue. The issue is, again, that's why we look at attract, transact, retain, because what you're actually, we have another model, really transformation happens with 3 levels of change: process, message, and structure. They have to happen together. What happens very often is you introduce a digital strategy with a data analytics back end, but you didn't change the sales choreography or the staff behavior. They all have to work together. And the big mistake today in digital, it's an add-on exercise. That's a big mistake. Because digital is a disruptive tool that changes customers' behavior. If you're changing customers' behavior, you need to change sales choreography and the staff behavior. If you do it in isolation, it's a failure. You really need to look at it holistically, and most companies today don't. And that's a big mistake.
And if I can add, I also think that this is where software can help, because most people go at a certain use case or that sort of thing. They build an environment, and if it's isolated, as Jean-Pierre said, I think it will be limited. If you build it on a software layer that can connect everything else, you can move from use case to use case to use case. Once you've solved one problem, every company has another one and another one. Yeah. And the more you can connect it to real data, to existing things, the more that can be used to automate the content. So it takes it away from people, which aren't there, to triggers, to events, to data as the content. So if you can use things that are happening as the content itself, or to trigger different assets, then it's much more powerful. And then if you can use that same platform for multiple use cases, it becomes, again, a real weapon to do that. You know, you mentioned San Francisco, Steve. That's happening today because we happen to share that customer. In fact, that won an award last year. San Francisco's wayfinding won an award here at ICX. And now the Metro Transit Authority is doing that. And so the federal government's actually realized that they need to fund this. So they're out there. San Francisco's applied for a huge grant, about $50 million, to build a smart city so that they can have people arrive, because I think it's something like 800,000 residents. You live there, 800,000 residents, but they get 8 million visitors a year. So the population is largely tourists from outside. And so the experience has to be one where you get to a place and it wants to be connected. They don't want to move from San Francisco through BART, through the Metro Transit Authority to a ferry and not have some continuity, right? Whether it's conventions or anything that's going on. So as we get smarter, these things can be connected, and you may even, not only in your same company, but have to work with other companies. And so that's why I promote that abstraction idea, so that we can preserve each independent investment, but connect them to different entities so that it can be leveraged across the digital layer, but while preserving security, because that's the key, because the banks will never approve it if it breaks, and if you're recreating their data outside. It has to preserve what's there, but be utilized in this layer, if that helps. That's what I see it.
One more reaction to what you showed us, which was mind-boggling, and congratulations. Do you identify who's doing this? I mean, when we see people acting in the store, like I'm interested in this Beats ear thing, do you know who that person is? Can you identify them?
We don't know. Well, no, we don't do personally identifying. So I don't know. You know, it's Jean-Pierre or it's Chris or it's me specifically. That's not something we're actually. That's not really relevant as to their specific identity. What is relevant is it's a male about 40 years old who, you know, I know what their stature is like. I know if they're tall, they're short, they're fat, they're thin. I can guess roughly their age. When I look at their features, I know what they're, within a certain degree of confidence, I know kind of what they're thinking. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they, you know, stressed. Are they stressed? Exactly. I mean, I can even look at their faces and know what their heartbeat is doing at that particular moment, what their pulse rate is like. Using it's called Eulerian video amplification, and it's a lot of words, but it's really just looking at someone's skin color and measuring very, very subtle changes in color to measure heartbeat. So we do know all this information. Your point is a good one, though. Like, what do you do with all this information? Do I have time to analyze this? Does the store manager care about these sorts of things? In most cases, no. But today, I think the answer is probably no. But the reality is that if you don't do something with that data and you don't change the in-store behavior, the store choreography, which I think is a great term, those businesses will get left behind from stores that do. And I think there will be an economic imperative to use that information, even if it doesn't exist today. But that imperative will happen. But you can. You can't get down to that level. I mean, we don't in retail, and there's some regulations around that. But there's military applications where they do want that, and they get. It's all a question of investment. You get security cameras and things like that. In the security world, that's solved. So you plug into that, and they can identify people on wanted lists, people coming into restricted areas. You can get that detailed if you want to. We don't through legislation protection, but it's certainly doable.
But it's too much, that information, it's not, there's so much data now that people don't know what to do with. And the opportunity, we spent a lot of time with our clients at the beginning looking at KPIs and KVI, key value indicators. And we do that so that we can then link back the metrics of the digital and the store experience to supporting those metrics. And I think as an industry, we owe it to ourselves to identify what are the key metrics when it comes to a digital experience or a retail environment experience that are the ones that we should be looking at. In the advertising, they've got it, you know, it's referral is, you know, net promoter score is the metric they look at. What's the metric for this industry? We should establish that, because then we can focus on all of that data. We can focus on the data that's relevant to our clients versus being a lot of garbage, a lot of information they don't know what to do with that overwhelms them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know we have like a minute left, so another question from the field?
You started to kind of touch on it there, but we've talked a lot in this whole conference about kind of breaking the rules of how we measure retail success and creating brand advocacy later versus sales per square foot, like right now. Yeah. So just curious, since like 95% of retailers still measure themselves as sales per square foot, that's kind of the reason why digital doesn't get sold in as often. How do you break down that barrier to get them to understand that value and actually invest in it?
That's a fabulous question. And that's the dilemma of again, we come back from the beginning of the exercise of establishing what are the additional, those metrics will never change. I mean, we call it decision bias. There's decision bias. One of the decision bias is historical, is a decision bias. And so you just have to deal with the fact that that's going to be in play. You just need to then identify the other KPIs and KVIs that you want to leverage on your digital strategy that you're going to measure that are meaningful, and educate the client why those metrics are important. So dwell time are important, and communication of dwell time, and message retention is important. Why? Because it leads to an affinity for the product, which leads to a sale. I mean, there is a stage gate process consumers take to make a buying decision, and one of them is preference. Are you in that preference selection process for those products? So educating the consumer on the path to purchase and how digital plays an important role and what are the metrics for each of those moments of truth, that's where you get the client engaged and seeing the value. The banks get it now. They've resisted digital for so many years. The financial guys looked at the ROI and said, there's no value in this. I can't get a payback. Now they get it. That if they're not digital, they're not connecting with the millennial consumers. They're not disrupting their traditional ritualistic pattern of going to the banks for a transaction. They need to break that, and digital is a great tool to do that. First, for personalizing it, and second, to effectively communicating. And so you're seeing those changes. But clients have to have a pain point where they see the value. Our job is to find those nuggets of insight to educate them.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Steve, anything?
Yeah, I think that is a real great question. We see that friction all the time, right? At the one end, you've got very high-end stores that are actually not even selling anything. It's really just kind of about the brand. Amazon stores, real Amazon stores, right? Real Google stores, real showrooming, I think is what's called now for Best Buy, where they're not necessarily selling per square foot. They're selling a brand. Those are very expensive propositions. What we've seen is those are hard sells. Easy sells are, here's a store, let's introduce a digital experience in an existing store at an existing location, changing very, very little footprint, and just introduce the idea of an experience at all. And they get maybe not a data-driven feel for what it does, but in most cases they will see a sales increase, even if it's just like, hey, a lot more people are interested in this thing and they'll sell more. Like the Beats headphone thing is a great example. There was no data analytics on that one to start out with, but they were really happy with the amount of engagement that people were coming in and doing, and that was a relatively inexpensive first pitch to them. But once they saw that, they wanted much more out of it. So, again, I think it has to do with consumer expectation driving these things in retail stores. 95% today, consumers are going to want that, right? That percentage is going to change, I think, rapidly.
Yeah. I love your consumer expectation point, because it's so, we call.
We're over.
Okay.
Cut you off. Okay. So what we'll do, we're here the rest of the day. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right.
I can see I'm getting the hook from David. So what I'd like to do is thank Steve Chen from Float to Hybrid.
Thank you.
Jean-Pierre from Chicoutimi Lacroix. I'm Chris Devlin from Omvex. Thank you for your participation. I hope we got a lot out of it.
Thank you.
Cheers.